We understand that debates are not meant for people to say who's right, who's wrong, but rather for us to look across and gather all this information. But why specifically should product managers care about having debates? Like, why is this not something that, maybe strategy teams do or executives do, etc.? And to be fair, other teams do also have debates. But one of the things that's really something that we want to keep in mind as product managers is that debates are super valuable for helping us eliminate our blind spots. And I'll dive into these in a little bit. We want to make sure that we are incorporating all of these different perspectives because we are serving customers and users. We're serving makers, so engineers and designers, and we're working with lots of different business stakeholders, ranging from sales to marketing to support, etc. And sometimes we're going to miss some of those voices. And so by making sure that these voices are in the room with us, we ensure that we don't lose sight of those perspectives. Another thing that's really important is that running debates actually really helps to break down information silos. And so again, I'll dive into this in a little bit, but kind of the larger the set of stakeholders you're working with, the more important it is for you to have debates, because that actually helps to spread information and reduces kind of any sort of loss of information or any sort of miscommunication. So that's why it's so important. And so first off, in terms of eliminating blind spots, each product manager is T-shaped. For those who don't know, when we say T-shaped, what we mean is assume that there is some x-axis. That x-axis is going to be all of your skills. And then the y-axis is basically the amount of mastery you have in any given skill. We like to say that product managers are T-shaped and not rectangle-shaped. And what we mean is that product managers have kind of a general set of masteries kind of across lots of different skill sets. And then they spike. They are really, really good at one or two particular things. And kind of each product manager is different in terms of the one thing that they're really good at. Some folks are really good at customer research, some folks are really good at financial modeling, some folks are really good at sales. It just really depends product manager to product manager. But no matter what, kind of because we are all T-shaped, that means that we're going to be really strong in some areas, but we're just going to be naturally not as strong in some other areas. And so, as an example, right, most of us are not legal and compliance experts. Some of us don't have as much exposure to how to price a product. Some of us may not have been on the front lines before in terms of customer support. And so we will have these blind spots, and that's just part and parcel of being human. And we are these specialized generalists, right, because we do need to have thoughtful conversations with all the different subject matter experts who are part of our business and part of our customer base. But we ourselves are not kind of the be-all and end-all subject matter expert. Like kind of we specialize in being generalists. Like that's the point of the job. And so to do that, we absolutely need to have various subject matter experts weigh in with their perspectives, or else we're going to miss some really critical context that then winds up making us make a less than optimal decision. And so that's why it's so important for us to have debates. One of them is to make sure that we can eliminate blind spots. Another thing that we run into is that when we're trying to coordinate across multiple stakeholders, especially if it's like a vague or complex task or decision, information flows very poorly kind of the more people you add to the mix. And so kind of if you have a very small team, if you have only maybe 2 or 3 stakeholders, information typically flows pretty easily, pretty organically. But when you're looking at a really distributed team, or when you're looking at a really, really large team, it starts to get really hard for information to flow into the right places at the right times. And so when we step in as product managers to conduct debates, we can dramatically improve the flow of information. And so to bring that to light, one of the things that I've done here is I've actually broken down the effectiveness of us stepping into this more centralized information sharing position instead of it kind of being organic. And so for those who don't know, the handshake problem is basically how many unique handshakes can you have in between different pairs of people, right? So let's say you have 2 people. Then with 2 people, you can only have 1 unique handshake, right? Because they can only shake each other's hands. With 3 people, you actually have 3 unique handshakes because person A shakes person B's hand, and so that's a 2-way flow of information. Person B shakes person C's hand, so that's another flow of information. And then person C shakes person A's hand, and so that's another one. And so it's jumped from 1 to 3. Then when you add on a 4th person, it actually jumps to 6. When you add on a 5th person, it jumps to 10. You can actually mathematically model this by using the formula n times n minus 1 divided by 2. And so here, right, let's say that we're working with 8 different stakeholders, then the number of handshakes, the amount of times that information needs to flow, is going to be 8 times 7 divided by 2, which is 28. And that, as you can quickly see, becomes really, really unmanageable for really anyone within those conversations. You start losing out on really critical pieces of information because some people are just not connected to other people, and that's really dangerous. But instead, if all of the stakeholders, arrange them in basically a circle around the product manager, and all the stakeholders talk to the product manager, and the product manager talks to all the stakeholders, we call this a spoken hub model. And by doing so, it scales linearly. Every additional stakeholder you add simply adds one more information flow, right? Because all that information flows into the product manager synthesizes all of it, and then the product manager broadcasts it all back out. And so as you can see, kind of the more stakeholders you have, the more crucial it is for us to actually step in as product managers. On the very right-hand side, that efficiency factor is basically you take the left column, number of paths if you do the handshake, versus the number of paths when you do spoken hub, right? So 6 divided by 4 is 1.5. And so we're 1 times more efficient when we step in to conduct the debate across 4 stakeholders. Across 8 stakeholders, when we step in, we're actually 3.5 times more effective than just letting it happen organically. And so as you can see, it is really crucial for us to make sure that we're in between so that we can help drive that communication flow. Okay, so now we've talked about what is a debate. And we've talked about why it's so important for product managers to have debates, right? We eliminate blind spots, and we can make sure that information is flowing to all the different stakeholders. But what exactly is the role of the product manager within the debate? Before we do that, let's first talk about just in general, what are the different roles within a debate? Generally speaking, every debate has kind of 2 core kinds of roles. There are facilitators, and then there are participants. It actually doesn't help for us to say, like, hey, there are these different groups. Each group is going to be arguing their own point of view, right? Kind of because, in essence, they're all doing the same thing. Really, we can just generalize this to their facilitators and their participants. And so kind of what are the differences between these 2 roles? Well, a facilitator, what they're doing is they're really taking this neutral perspective where they're helping to make sure that the whole thing runs. And so the goal of the facilitator is actually not to contribute insights. It's actually to stay neutral, where they really want to just keep the overall conversation moving between all of the participants. They're summarizing kind of the different perspectives that are coming up. They're reflecting back insights to the group, and they're making sure that folks are on the hook for tackling next steps. On the flip side, a participant is someone who actually is coming to the table with a perspective. They actually need to have an opinion. If you don't have an opinion in a debate, you're not really a participant, you're really more of an onlooker, right? And so we're not really looking for spectators. Debates are not spectator sports. It's not effective to have spectators because you can always just send that information async. The point of having people in a debate is actually to have them give you a unique perspective. And so they need to be opinionated, where they're going to be, they'll have some stance that they have, and they're going to want to dive deep into it, and not just say, I think it should be this way, but actually provide why. You want to bring up qualitative evidence, quantitative evidence, right? You want to bring up user interviews or industry trends or metrics or what have you, so that way you actually back up that perspective. And so just saying, oh, I feel it's not the right course of action is not enough. You have to say, I believe we should go do XYZ in ABC way because competitors are doing it this way, or we see that these kinds of companies are doing it this way, or the market trends of whatever suggest what. Kind of you want to make sure that you're bringing evidence to the table as a participant. You're not really there to spread rumors or to kind of shoot off the cuff. You want to be prepared as you come into the debate. And then on top of that, a participant is going to have next steps after the debate concludes. Because the whole thing about a debate is we're really trying to assess a landscape together. Right? We're trying to pull together all of these different perspectives, and many times we're going to find unexplored areas that need some additional clarification. And so there are particular participants who are going to be better at tackling those unknowns than other people will. It doesn't really make sense for a facilitator to try to go close that gap because they're not domain experts. They're not going to be able to go close that gap. Whereas a participant very much can because they are the subject matter experts. And so kind of those are the 2 core kinds of roles that we should expect to see in a debate. So how does the product manager fit in? Well, personally, I've seen that product managers are really uniquely suited to tackle both roles. Why is that? Well, you want the product manager to be the facilitator because they generally understand kind of the outline of the problem. They see kind of, these are the different pieces that we're going to need, and these are the pieces that we're missing, kind of we need to bring these kinds of folks in. We've heard that this person hasn't spoken up yet. We very much need them to speak up because that is a core piece of the context that we need. And so they're going to know what topics are relevant. They're going to know what topics are not relevant, and they're going to be able to keep the conversation moving. And so it's really important for the product manager specifically to be the facilitator. If you have kind of anyone not part of the product decision, be a facilitator, right? Like let's say you bring in some external consultant to be your facilitator, or someone from a totally different department, and sometimes you're just not going to get kind of that quality of thought and that quality of conversation that you need. And so having a product manager be the facilitator is actually incredibly important. But on the flip side, you also don't want the product manager to sit it out. Because product managers actually have a lot of deep context in terms of understanding what is kind of the long-term product strategy. What is that general trajectory? What is the vision? What is the mission? All that good stuff. What's the context behind the product? Why did we build it this way? Who did we build it for? What were the hard trade-offs that we made? Why did we make these trade-offs, right? And so a product manager is going to have an opinion when they are walking into a particular debate. And so you kind of need both from the product manager. You need them to be the facilitator, but you also need them to be a participant. And so that creates tension, especially because, as we mentioned before, the facilitator is supposed to be neutral, but the participant is supposed to be very opinionated. And it's quite hard to kind of do both. So how are we going to make that work?